Your breath has been weaponized against you, and I'm about to prove it. What if I told you that every breath you've been taking your entire life was wrong? And what if the people who taught you how to breathe did it on purpose to keep you disconnected from the most powerful manifestation technology that's ever existed? There's a reason they don't teach you breath work in school. There's a reason yoga got turned into expensive leggings and Instagram poses. There's a reason meditation became a commodified app subscription instead of the reality-altering practice it actually is. Because when you breathe correctly, when you understand the ancient pattern that literally forces quantum coherence, you become too powerful to control. And they can't have that. Now, before you click away thinking this is just another breathing exercise video, let me show you something that's going to break your brain. And if this is already resonating, do yourself a favor and hit that subscribe button right now, because what I'm about to reveal will change how you interact with reality permanently. Here's what nobody tells you. You take about 20,000 breaths per day. That's 20,000 opportunities to program your nervous system into either creation mode or survival mode. And right now, I'd bet everything that 90% of your breaths are locking you into survival, into scarcity, into the exact opposite of manifestation. But it's not your fault. You were taught to breathe into your chest. Short, shallow, rapid breaths that keep your sympathetic nervous system activated 24/7. Fight or flight. Constant, low-grade stress. And when you're in that state, manifestation is biologically impossible. Your body is too busy scanning for threats to create anything. It's too busy trying to survive to thrive. You're locked in cortisol production, adrenaline dumps, inflammatory responses. Your cells are literally preparing for war, and you wonder why abundance feels impossible. They did this deliberately, and I'm going to prove it to you right now. In 1892, something disappeared from Western medicine. Not surgery, not antibiotics. Those didn't even exist yet. What disappeared was pranayama, the ancient science of breath control that had been integrated into medical textbooks for decades. Before 1892, doctors understood that breath was the primary interface between consciousness and physiology. They prescribed specific breathing patterns for anxiety, depression, digestive issues, even infectious diseases. Breathing wasn't alternative medicine, it was medicine. Then the Flexner Report happened. Abraham Flexner, funded by Carnegie and Rockefeller, systematically dismantled holistic medical education and replaced it with pharmaceutical-focused curriculum. Overnight breathing techniques vanished from medical schools. Plant medicine was criminalized. Energy healing was labeled pseudoscience. Why? Because you can't patent breath. You can't sell a prescription for pranayama. You can't create lifelong customers from people who heal themselves with techniques that cost nothing and require no external intervention. So they removed it. They removed your birthright. They took the most powerful self-healing, reality-manifesting technology that exists, and they buried it under 100 years of pharmaceutical dependency and scientific materialism. But here's what they couldn't erase. The monks still know. The yogis still practice. The indigenous shamans never forgot. And now you're about to learn what they've been keeping from you. Listen, I know how this sounds. I know you're probably thinking this is going to be some woo-woo mystical thing with no real science. But stay with me, because what I'm about to show you isn't mysticism. It's neuroscience. It's quantum biology. And it's been proven in labs all over the world. The pattern I'm going to teach you does 3 things simultaneously, and when these 3 things happen together, manifestation isn't a hope or a wish. It's a biological inevitability. First, it switches your nervous system from sympathetic to parasympathetic dominance, fight or flight to rest and digest, survival to creation. When your body feels safe, it opens the channels for receiving. Second, it creates coherence between your heart and brain. Your heart generates an electromagnetic field 5,000 times stronger than your brain. When heart and brain synchronize through breath, you're broadcasting a unified frequency that the quantum field responds to instantly. Third, and this is the part that's going to sound crazy until you try it, it alters your brainwave state into theta. Theta is where the subconscious lives. It's where beliefs are stored. It's the operating system of your reality. And when you access theta while conscious, you can rewrite the code. This isn't theory. Dr. Andrew Huberman at Stanford has published extensively on breathwork's effect on the nervous system. HeartMath Institute has decades of research on heart-brain coherence. Dr. Joe Dispenza has measured thousands of people entering theta states through specific breathing patterns and literally rewiring their brains in real time. The science is there. It's peer-reviewed. It's replicated. But nobody's teaching it in schools. Nobody's talking about it on mainstream platforms. Because the moment you understand that you can alter your consciousness and reprogram your reality through something as simple as breath, you stop being a consumer. You stop being controllable. And that's a problem for the people who profit from your disconnection. Now let me tell you about the Tibetan monks and why the CIA was so interested in them. This is documented, declassified. You can look this up yourself. In the 1960s and 70s, during the Cold War, the CIA ran programs like MK Ultra and Project Stargate. They were researching psychic abilities, remote viewing, consciousness, manipulation. And one of the things they studied was Tibetan monks who could do things that shouldn't be possible. These monks could raise their body temperature through breath alone. They'd sit in sub-zero temperatures wrapped in wet sheets and through a practice called tummo breathing. They would generate so much internal heat that the sheets would steam and dry completely. They measured this. It wasn't fraud, it was reproducible. But it wasn't just body temperature. These monks could slow their heart rate to nearly undetectable levels. They could enter death-like states and return. They could go without food for weeks while maintaining perfect mental clarity. And the foundation of all of it was breath. The pattern they used is called the vase breath. You fill the lower belly first, creating pressure. Then you hold the breath in the lower abdomen while visualizing energy accumulating. Then you release it up the spine in a specific pathway that activates what they call the central channel, what yogis call sushumna, what modern neuroscience calls the vagus nerve. When you breathe this way, you're not just moving air, you're moving energy. You're circulating electromagnetic current through your nervous system. You're literally charging your biofield like a battery. And here's what the CIA figured out. When you charge your biofield through breath, you can influence external electromagnetic systems. You can affect probability. You can collapse quantum potentials in your favor. They called it psychokinesis. The monks called it manifestation. But it's the same thing. It's consciousness affecting matter through frequency, and breath is the dial. The CIA classified most of this research. Why? Because if everyone knew they could influence reality through breathwork, the entire control system collapses. You can't govern people who understand their electromagnetic beings broadcasting reality commands every second. So they buried it. They mocked it. They turned yoga into expensive studios and breath into a trendy wellness thing you do for 5 minutes on an app. They domesticated the tiger and told you it's a house cat. But the technique still works, and you're about to learn it. Let me tell you what happened when I first tried this pattern. I'd been doing manifestation work for years. Visualizations, affirmations, vision boards, scripting, all of it. And I'd get little results here and there. Enough to keep me interested, but not enough to actually change my life. Then I found this breathing technique in an obscure translation of a Tibetan text. The instructions were weird. Hold your breath in your belly. Visualize fire. Feel the heat rising. Release up the spine. It sounded too simple. But I tried it. 5 minutes before my morning meditation. And on the third day, something broke open. I can't even describe it properly. It felt like my chest cracked open and this warm pressure flooded my whole body. My hands were tingling. My vision got sharper. Colors were brighter. And I felt this certainty. Not hope, not optimism, certainty. Like when you know your name or you know what year it is. That kind of knowing. I went into my meditation and visualized what I wanted to manifest. And instead of it feeling like I was wishing or pretending, it felt like I was remembering something that already happened, like I'd already experienced it and I was just recalling the memory. That's when I knew this was different. This wasn't law of attraction hopium. This was something else. Within 2 weeks, I manifested 3 things I'd been trying to create for over a year. Not kind of, not almost. Exactly what I'd been visualizing. And it wasn't effort, it wasn't force. It was like reality just rearranged itself around my frequency. That's what happens when you combine breath, coherence, and theta state. You don't attract things. You don't pull things towards you. You shift into the timeline where those things already exist. And this is where it gets wild. Quantum physics tells us that all possibilities exist simultaneously. Every version of your life, every outcome, every timeline is already real in the quantum field. You're not creating anything new. You're selecting which probability wave you collapse into experience. And how do you select? Frequency. You tune your electromagnetic signature to match the frequency of the reality you want. And breath is how you tune. Think of it like a radio. All the stations are broadcasting simultaneously. You're not creating the music. You're just turning the dial to the frequency you want to hear. Right now, most people are stuck on the scarcity station, the fear station, the limitation station. And they're listening to that frequency 24/7, wondering why their life reflects lack. But when you change your breath, you change your frequency. You turn the dial. And suddenly you're receiving the abundance station, the clarity station, the manifestation station. It was always there. You were just tuned to the wrong frequency. This is what the monks know. This is what the yogis practice. This is what the elite study in private while telling you it's all superstition. Now let me break down what's actually happening physiologically when you do this pattern. Because this isn't magic. It's biology. When you breathe into your lower belly and hold the breath there, you're activating your parasympathetic nervous system. Your vagus nerve runs from your brainstem down to your abdomen. When you create pressure in the belly through breath retention, you're directly stimulating the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve controls your rest and digest response. It lowers cortisol. It reduces inflammation. It signals safety to your entire system. And when your body feels safe, your heart rate variability increases. That's the measure of resilience, of adaptability, of coherence. High heart rate variability means your heart and brain are synchronized. They're communicating clearly. And when that happens, your heart starts generating a toroidal electromagnetic field that extends several feet beyond your body. This field is measurable. HeartMath Institute has documented it extensively. Your heart's electromagnetic field is 5,000 times stronger than your brain's. It's the most powerful broadcaster in your body. And when it's coherent, when it's rhythmic and stable, it affects everything around you. People feel it, situations shift, opportunities appear. It's not luck, it's physics. You're broadcasting a frequency of coherence, and the quantum field responds by organizing matter around that frequency. Then there's the theta brainwave component. When you hold your breath and focus your attention inward, your brain waves slow down. You drop from beta, your normal waking consciousness, into alpha, that relaxed awareness, then into theta, the borderland between waking and sleeping. Theta is where the subconscious lives. It's where your beliefs are stored, where your identity is coded, where your reality programs run on autopilot. Normally, you only access theta when you're almost asleep. Your conscious mind is offline, so you can't make changes. But this breathing pattern lets you enter theta while staying conscious. You're awake in the subconscious, and in that state you can install new beliefs, rewrite old programs, reprogram your identity. You're not fighting with affirmations. You're not trying to convince yourself. You're directly accessing the operating system and changing the code. This is why people who do this practice report sudden shifts in behavior. Habits that felt impossible to break just disappear. Limiting beliefs that were there for decades dissolve overnight because you're not working at the surface level anymore. You're in the root directory rewriting the source code. And when you change the code, the external reality has no choice but to update. Let me tell you about what happened in the 1970s at the Menninger Clinic. Dr. Elmer Green was studying yogis and their ability to control autonomous functions. Heart rate, body temperature, blood pressure. Things you're not supposed to be able to control consciously. He brought in Swami Rama, a yoga master from India. And this guy did things that broke every medical assumption. He stopped his heart, not slowed it down, stopped it for 17 seconds. Then he restarted it. He created a 10-degree temperature difference between two spots on his hand 3 inches apart. One side was hot, the other was cold. Same hand, same blood flow. How? Breath and visualization. That's it. He would breathe in a specific pattern while visualizing energy moving to specific parts of his body. And his physiology obeyed. Dr. Green was stunned. This wasn't placebo. This wasn't willpower. This was direct control over the autonomic nervous system through breath work. And if you can control body temperature and heart rate through breath, what else can you control? Your emotional state, your mental clarity, your energy levels, your ability to manifest, because all of those things are downstream from nervous system regulation. And your nervous system is controlled by breath. The yogis knew this thousands of years ago. They mapped it out in texts like the Hatha Yoga Pradipika and the Vigyan Bhairav Tantra. They didn't have EEG machines or heart rate monitors, but they understood the mechanics perfectly. Control the breath, control the mind. Control the mind, control reality. It's a direct chain, and the entry point is breath. So why don't they teach this in schools? Why isn't this standard education? Why did it disappear from medical training? Because the entire economic system depends on you feeling powerless. Pharmaceutical companies need you sick. Banks need you in debt. Governments need you stressed and distracted. The whole structure collapses if you realize you can heal yourself, regulate yourself, and manifest your reality through something free and innate. You're not supposed to know you're this powerful. You're supposed to outsource your health to doctors, your wealth to financial advisors, your spirituality to religions. You're supposed to look outside yourself for answers, for solutions, for permission. But the moment you understand that breath is the remote control for your entire system, you take the power back. You become sovereign, and that's dangerous to the system. Now let me walk you through the actual pattern. This is the technique that's been hidden, suppressed, and ridiculed for over a century, and it's about to change everything. Step 1. Sit comfortably. Spine straight. This matters. Your spine is the antenna. Energy moves up and down the spine through the cerebrospinal fluid. If you're slouched, the circuit is broken. Step 2. Place one hand on your lower belly, below the navel. This is your center of gravity, your power center. In martial arts, they call it the dantian. In yoga, it's the hara. This is where you're going to anchor the breath. Step 3. Inhale slowly through your nose for a count of 4. But here's the key. Don't let your chest rise. Breathe into your belly. Push your belly out against your hand. You should look slightly pregnant. This is diaphragmatic breathing, and most people have completely forgotten how to do it. Why does this matter? Because when you breathe into your chest, you're activating your sympathetic nervous system. Chest breathing is emergency breathing. It signals danger. But when you breathe into your belly, you activate the parasympathetic system. You signal safety. Creation mode. Step 4. Hold the breath in your lower belly for a count of 4. And this is where it gets interesting. While you're holding, visualize the breath as energy, as light, as heat accumulating in your lower abdomen. Compress it. Concentrate it. You're building pressure, you're charging the battery. Ancient texts call this the vase breath because you're filling a vessel. You're not just holding air, you're gathering energy. And you should start to feel warmth, tingling, pressure building in your belly. Step 5. Exhale slowly for a count of 6. But here's the critical part. Visualize the energy rising up your spine as you exhale. See it moving from your belly up through your torso, up your spine, and out the top of your head. Like a fountain, like a geyser. This is the key. You're not just releasing air, you're moving energy through the central channel. You're activating the vagus nerve pathway. You're stimulating the cerebrospinal fluid flow. You're literally charging your nervous system. Step 6. Pause for a count of 2 with empty lungs. Feel the stillness. Feel the space. This is the gap between thoughts where creation happens. Then repeat. Inhale into the belly for 4. Hold and compress for 4. Exhale up the spine for 6. Pause for 2. Do this for 5 minutes minimum. And here's what happens. Within 30 seconds, you'll feel different. Your heart rate slows. Your mind quiets. That anxious static starts to fade. Within 2 minutes, you're dropping into alpha, that relaxed awareness. By minute 3, you're touching theta. The subconscious is accessible, and this is where you manifest. This is where you visualize what you want. Not from a place of lack, not from wanting, from coherence, from certainty. You see it as already done. You feel the feeling of the wish fulfilled. And you let it imprint into theta, into the subconscious, into the operating system. Then you release it. You don't grip it. You don't obsess over it. You just let it go into the field, trusting that the frequency is set, the signal is broadcast, and reality is rearranging. That's it. That's the pattern, and it's been hidden in plain sight for thousands of years. Now let me tell you what the research shows. Dr. Joe Dispenza has measured thousands of people doing breath work and meditation. He uses EEG to track brain waves, HRV monitors for heart coherence, and even measures the energy field around the body. And what he found is that when people do this specific pattern, breathe into the belly, hold with visualization, exhale up the spine, they enter theta within minutes. Their heart coherence spikes, and the electromagnetic field around their body strengthens and expands. But here's the crazy part. When people do this practice and then visualize their desired reality from that coherent theta state, their brain waves show the same patterns as if the event already happened. Their brain can't tell the difference between the visualization and the actual experience. So neurologically, you've already lived it. You've already experienced it. And your subconscious, which controls 95% of your behavior, starts acting as if it's true. You start making different choices, noticing different opportunities, taking different actions, not because you're forcing it, because your identity shifted. You're no longer the person trying to manifest. You're the person who already has it. And that frequency shift changes everything. HeartMath Institute found similar results. When people achieve heart-brain coherence through breath work, they report synchronicities increasing, unexpected opportunities appearing, the right people showing up at the right time. They call it flow state. But it's not mystical. It's electromagnetic. When your heart is broadcasting a coherent frequency, you're literally affecting the quantum field around you, and the field responds by organizing matter, by collapsing probabilities, by delivering what matches your frequency. This is why gratitude works. This is why feeling the wish fulfilled works. Because those emotional states create heart coherence. But you can't fake it. You can't just say you're grateful while your body is in stress mode. You have to generate the actual physiological state, and breath is how you do that. Now let me tell you why they turned yoga into expensive studios and branded leggings. Because real yoga, the original practice, was never about flexibility or fitness. It was about energy cultivation and reality manipulation through breath and posture. The Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, written over 2,000 years ago, barely mention physical postures. Most of the text is about consciousness, about meditation, about siddhis, which are psychic powers, telepathy, clairvoyance, manifestation. These weren't metaphors. They were documented capabilities that arose from consistent practice. And the foundation of all of it was pranayama, breath control. The physical postures existed to prepare the body to sit still and breathe correctly for long periods. That's it. The poses were never the point. The breath was the point. But when yoga came to the West, they stripped out the pranayama. They removed the philosophy. They turned it into a workout class. Why? Because a population doing real pranayama is a population that can self-regulate, self-heal, and self-manifest. And that's bad for business, so they gave you downward dog and warrior pose and told you that's yoga. Meanwhile, the real practice, the breath practices that alter consciousness and generate siddhis, got hidden in ashrams and monasteries where most people would never find them. Until now. Because you're finding them. And once you practice this, once you feel the shift, you can't go back. You can't unsee it. You become a frequency generator who consciously tunes reality. And that makes you ungovernable. Let me tell you about the Wim Hof phenomenon. This guy became famous for doing impossible things. Climbing Mount Everest in shorts, sitting in ice for hours, running a marathon in the desert without water. And when scientists studied him, they thought he was a genetic freak, an outlier. But then he taught his method to other people, ordinary people with no special training, and they did the same things. They controlled their immune response. They regulated body temperature. They endured extremes that should have killed them. What was the method? Breath. A specific pattern of hyperventilation followed by breath retention. It's not the same as the pattern I just taught you, but it proves the same principle. Breath is the interface between consciousness and physiology. Change the breath, change the body, change the body, change what's possible. Wim Hof made this mainstream enough that universities started studying it. And they found that his breathing technique allows people to consciously activate their sympathetic nervous system, spike adrenaline on command, and then use that energy intentionally instead of reactively. But here's what's interesting. He didn't invent this. He rediscovered Tummo, the Tibetan practice I mentioned earlier, the one the CIA studied, the one the monks have been using for centuries. He just repackaged it and made it accessible. And the response from the medical establishment? Skepticism. Dismissal. They tried to explain it away as placebo or genetic anomaly. Even when the data proved otherwise, they resisted. Because if breath can do this, if ordinary people can control their autonomic functions and immune response through breathing, what else have we been lied to about? The resistance tells you everything. When something threatens the paradigm, the system attacks it. They mock it. They marginalize it. They try to memory hole it. But they can't. Because once enough people practice it and get results, the truth spreads. And that's what's happening now. Breathwork is coming back. Not the watered-down wellness version. The real techniques. The ones that alter consciousness and generate power. Now let's talk about what happens when you do this practice consistently. Because one session will give you a taste, a week will show you it's real, but a month will fundamentally change your operating system. People report the same things over and over. First, anxiety drops. That constant background static that most people think is normal just fades. You realize you've been living in low-grade fight-or-flight for years, maybe decades, and suddenly you're not. You feel calm, grounded, present. Second sleep improves. Deep sleep, REM sleep, the kind of sleep where you wake up actually rested. Why? Because your nervous system isn't in overdrive anymore. You're not processing stress hormones all night. Your body can finally repair itself. Third, clarity increases. Brain fog lifts. Decisions become easier. You stop second-guessing yourself. Why? Because theta access rewires the prefrontal cortex. You're literally upgrading your brain's processing power. Fourth, and this is the big one, synchronicities explode. You think of someone and they text you. You need information and it appears. Opportunities show up out of nowhere. People call this luck, but it's not luck. It's coherence. You're broadcasting a clear frequency and reality is responding. Fifth, manifestations start landing. Not all of them, not instantly, but things you've been trying to create for months or years suddenly click into place effortlessly. Like reality just rearranges around your new frequency. This isn't wishful thinking. This is documented. Thousands of people report the same pattern. And the explanation is simple. You've shifted from survival mode to creation mode, from incoherent to coherent, from reactive to generative, and reality reflects that. Let me tell you what happened with my friend Sarah. She'd been trying to manifest a specific job for over a year. Visualizations, affirmations, interviews, networking, everything. Nothing worked. She'd get close, and then it would fall through. Over and over. I taught her this breathing pattern, 5 minutes every morning before her visualization practice. She was skeptical but desperate, so she tried it. Within 3 days, she said something felt different, like a pressure released, like she'd been holding her breath for years and finally exhaled. 2 weeks later, she got a random email. A company she'd never heard of found her profile online and wanted to interview her. The position was better than what she'd been applying for. Better pay, better location, better everything. She got the offer within a week. Coincidence? Maybe. But then it kept happening. Her relationship improved. Her health improved. Things just started working. And the only variable that changed was the breath practice. That's what I mean by this forces the universe to respond. It's not forcing like effort or struggle. It's forcing like a key forces a lock to open. You're applying the right frequency, and reality has no choice but to match it. Now let me address the obvious question. If this is so powerful, why isn't everyone doing it? Why isn't this mainstream? 2 reasons. First, it got suppressed. We covered that. Etymology disappeared from schools. Pranayama disappeared from medicine. Yoga got commercialized. The real techniques were systematically hidden or ridiculed. Second, it requires discipline. Not a lot, 5 minutes a day, but consistent. And most people can't do consistent. They want a pill. They want instant results. They want someone else to do it for them. This practice requires you to show up every day, even when you don't feel like it, even when you don't see immediate results. You have to trust the process long enough for the compounding to happen. And that's a filter. The people who stick with it get results. The people who quit after 3 days don't. And then they say it doesn't work. But it does work. It's biology, it's physics. It works every single time if you do it correctly and consistently. The universe doesn't respond to desperation, it responds to frequency, and you can't generate the frequency in one session. You have to retrain your nervous system, you have to reprogram your subconscious. That takes repetition. But here's the good news. It's cumulative. Every session builds on the last one. By week 2, you're deeper than week 1. By week 4, you're in theta within seconds. By week 8, you're living in a different baseline state entirely. And once you're there, manifestation isn't something you do, it's something you are. You're a walking coherence field, and reality organizes around you automatically. Now let me tell you about the dark side of this knowledge, because there is one. When you understand that breath controls your frequency and frequency controls your reality, you start noticing how breath is being weaponized against you. Stress, fear, anxiety, anger, all of these emotions alter your breathing. They make it shallow, rapid, chest-centered. And when you breathe that way, you lock into survival mode. You disconnect from your power. You become controllable. Now think about the news, think about social media, think about the content you consume every day. What emotion is it designed to trigger? Fear, outrage, anxiety. And what happens to your breath when you feel those emotions? It gets shallow, it gets fast, it moves into your chest. You're being deliberately triggered into stress breathing, which locks you into stress physiology, which keeps you disconnected from your manifestation power. This is psychological warfare. And your breath is the battlefield. They don't need to control your thoughts if they can control your breath. Because your breath controls your nervous system. And your nervous system controls your perception of reality. So every time you scroll through fear-based content, every time you watch news designed to trigger you, every time you engage with outrage bait, you're being pulled out of coherence. Your breath shifts, your frequency drops, and you disconnect from your power. This is why people feel so powerless. They're breathing like they're in constant danger. And when you breathe like that, you are in danger. Neurologically, hormonally, electromagnetically, you're in survival mode. And you can't manifest from survival mode. You can only react. They never needed to control your mind directly. That's too messy, too unpredictable. People resist when you tell them what to think. But control the breath, and the mind follows automatically. This is the part nobody talks about, because once you see it, you can't unsee it. Watch how fear content is edited. Fast cuts, alarming headlines, urgent music, red banners, breaking news chyrons. All of it is engineered to speed up your breathing without you noticing. Your chest tightens, your breath shortens, your diaphragm locks, and in that moment your nervous system flips into threat detection mode. Blood leaves the prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for reasoning, creativity, and long-term planning, and floods into the limbic system. Emotion, reaction, impulse. You're no longer thinking. You're reacting. And a reactive human is a programmable human. This is not metaphorical. This is measurable neuroscience. Functional MRI scans show reduced prefrontal activity under stress breathing. EEGs show increased high beta and gamma noise. Coherence collapses. Your signal becomes chaotic. And chaos is easy to steer. That's why they keep you angry. That's why they keep you afraid. That's why they keep you arguing about surface-level distractions while the real levers of reality stay hidden. Because a person who breathes deeply, slowly, and rhythmically is impossible to rush, impossible to panic, impossible to manipulate. They see clearly, they act intentionally, and they don't buy what they don't need. They don't vote from fear. They don't comply from anxiety. They don't outsource their power, so the system does everything it can to keep you breathing wrong. Now here's the part that really exposes the game. Even the language gives it away. Panic attack, breathless, suffocating pressure, choking anxiety, losing your breath, catching your breath. Every description of stress is a description of disrupted breathing, and every description of peace is slow, deep, full breath, calm, grounded, centered, balanced, still. Ancient cultures knew this. That's why breath was sacred. In Hebrew, the word for breath and spirit is the same, ruach. In Greek, pneuma means breath and soul. In Sanskrit, prana is breath and life force. In Chinese, qi is breath and energy. Every ancient civilization encoded the same truth. Breath is the bridge between the physical and the invisible, between matter and consciousness, between the body and reality itself. But modern culture stripped that meaning away. They reduced breath to oxygen exchange, mechanical, mundane, automatic, something you don't think about. And that's the trick. The most powerful interface you have is the one they trained you to ignore, because if you never pay attention to your breath, you never realize it's the steering wheel. You're driving the car of your life blindfolded, wondering why you keep ending up in the same places, same problems, same patterns, same cycles, same frustrations. And every time you try to change something externally without changing the breath, it snaps back. Because the frequency didn't change, the signal stayed the same. Reality just kept responding faithfully to what you were broadcasting. This is why affirmations fail for most people. They're saying positive words while breathing, like they're being hunted. The subconscious doesn't listen to words. It listens to physiology. It listens to breath. Breath tells the body whether you're safe or in danger, and the body tells the subconscious what is possible. If your breath says danger, the subconscious locks down creation. It prioritizes survival. It narrows perception. It repeats what's familiar, not what's desired. That's why people feel stuck. They're trying to manifest from a nervous system that's been trained for war. Now here's where the ancient pattern becomes a weapon in the opposite direction. When you deliberately slow the breath, deepen it into the belly and hold it with intention, you are sending a signal of absolute safety to the nervous system. Not intellectual safety, biological safety, the kind your cells respond to immediately. Cortisol drops, adrenaline settles, the vagus nerve activates, the heart rhythm smooths out. And when that happens, something profound occurs. The brain stops scanning for threats and starts scanning for patterns, opportunities, connections, possibilities. This is why creativity explodes in coherent states. This is why insights arrive in the shower. This is why solutions appear when you relax. It's not coincidence, it's physiology. You're not smarter in those moments. You're more coherent. And coherence is intelligence aligned with reality. The ancient breathing pattern exploits this deliberately. It doesn't hope for relaxation. It forces coherence. That's why it works even when you're stressed, skeptical, or distracted. You're hacking the system directly. Breath is a lever that bypasses belief. You don't have to believe in gravity for it to work. You don't have to believe in this for your nervous system to respond. It responds automatically. That's the beauty of it. That's also why it terrifies institutions built on belief management, because this doesn't require ideology, it requires practice. And practice can't be debated away. Now let's talk about the part they really don't want you experimenting with. Intention layered onto breath. Because breath alone regulates the system. But breath plus intention programs it. This is where manifestation stops being abstract and starts becoming mechanical. When you enter theta through breath, the barrier between conscious intention and subconscious execution dissolves. Normally, the subconscious filters and resist change. It's designed to keep you consistent, not happy. Familiar, not fulfilled. But in theta, that guard goes offline. The subconscious becomes receptive, plastic, programmable. This is why hypnosis works. This is why trauma installs itself during shock. This is why children absorb belief so easily. Theta is the gateway, and breath is the key. When you hold the breath in the lower abdomen while visualizing energy compressing, you're doing two things at once. You're creating physiological stillness and cognitive focus. Stillness quiets noise. Focus directs signal. That combination amplifies intention. Think of it like a laser. Scattered light has no power. Coherent light cuts through steel. Your intention is the light. Breath coherence is the lens. Without the breath, your intention scatters. With it, it penetrates. This is why monks could sit for hours and alter their internal state at will. This is why yogis described siddhis not as miracles but as side effects. When consciousness becomes coherent, reality responds differently. Not because you're special, because the field is. You're just finally aligned with it. Modern physics has a term for this that sounds dry but is explosive if you understand it. Phase coherence. When oscillating systems synchronize, energy transfer becomes efficient. Lasers. Superconductors. Bose-Einstein condensates. All rely on coherence. Your nervous system is an oscillating system. Your heart, brain, and breath are rhythmic generators. When they synchronize, you enter phase coherence, and coherent systems influence their environment disproportionately. This is why one coherent person can shift a room. Why calm spreads, why panic spreads, why moods are contagious. It's not psychological, it's electromagnetic entrainment. You are always entraining or being entrained. The question is whether you're doing it consciously. The ancient breathing pattern trains you to entrain reality instead of being entrained by it. That's the inversion. That's the rebellion. And once you experience it, the illusion of powerlessness collapses. You realize you were never weak. You were just incoherent. And incoherence is fixable, 5 minutes at a time. Now let me explain something that will make the resistance make perfect sense. If large numbers of people practice this breathing pattern daily, entire industries would collapse within a decade. Mental health would shift from management to resolution. Chronic stress would plummet. Impulse consumption would drop. Fear-based media would lose engagement. Pharmaceutical dependency would decrease. Productivity would increase, but not in the way corporations want. People would work less, not more. They'd need less distraction, less validation, less external stimulation. They'd become internally resourced. And internally resourced people don't chase. They choose. They don't obey narratives, they evaluate them. They don't panic buy, they don't doom scroll, they don't surrender agency. That's why this knowledge stays fringe. Not because it doesn't work. Because it works too well. So it gets labeled dangerous, unscientific, conspiratorial, anything to keep it out of mainstream adoption. But here's the paradox. You don't need mainstream approval. You don't need permission. You don't need consensus. You just need breath. Your breath, right now. Every inhale is a choice. Every exhale is a signal. You are broadcasting something whether you realize it or not. The universe is already responding. The only question is whether you like what you're telling it. This ancient pattern doesn't beg the universe. It doesn't plead. It doesn't hope. It declares, quietly, internally, biologically. It sets the frequency and lets physics do the rest. And once you understand that, manifestation stops being mystical and starts being inevitable. You stop asking whether it works and start asking how precise you can get, how clean your signal can be, how coherent you can live. That's when life stops feeling like resistance and starts feeling like alignment. Not because the world changed, because you did, through breath. The one thing they told you was automatic, insignificant, and meaningless. The one thing that turns out to be the master switch. And now that you know, you can never unknow it. Once this clicks, you start noticing something else that's unsettling at first. You realize how rarely you've actually been breathing consciously in your entire life. Most people spend decades breathing unconsciously, which means living unconsciously. Autopilot breath creates autopilot identity. Autopilot identity creates autopilot outcomes, and the system loves autopilot humans because they're predictable. Predictable people can be modeled, marketed to, nudged, steered. But the moment breath becomes conscious, predictability collapses. You begin interrupting loops, emotional loops, thought loops, behavioral loops. And when loops break, new timelines open. This is why breathwork feels destabilizing to some people at first. It's not because it's dangerous, it's because it dissolves structure. And most people mistake structure for safety. But structure isn't safety. Coherence is. The system trains you to cling to structure because structure is controllable. Coherence is not. Coherence emerges organically when systems align internally. It cannot be imposed from the outside. That's why authoritarian systems fear coherence more than chaos. Chaos burns itself out. Coherence spreads. You've probably felt this in your own life without having language for it. Think about moments when everything suddenly started working, when doors opened effortlessly, when conversations flowed, when the right information arrived at the right time. Those weren't lucky streaks. Those were moments of accidental coherence. You weren't forcing. You weren't grasping. You weren't breathing like you were under attack. Your system was aligned, even briefly, and reality responded instantly. The ancient breathing pattern turns those accidents into a skill. That's the difference. Skill can be repeated. Skill compounds. Skill can be refined. And that's what they don't want you mastering. Because a skilled human doesn't wait, doesn't beg, doesn't outsource. They generate, they broadcast, they select. And once you understand that reality selection is frequency-based, not effort-based, the entire hustle narrative collapses. You stop glorifying exhaustion. You stop equating struggle with virtue. You realize that burnout isn't a badge of honor, it's a sign of incoherence. And incoherence always costs more energy than it produces. That's why so many people feel drained all the time. They're leaking energy through stress breathing, emotional reactivity, and mental noise. They're broadcasting scrambled signals and then wondering why reality feels unstable. The ancient breath seals those leaks. It consolidates energy. That's why practitioners describe feeling fuller, heavier, more present, not physically heavier, energetically denser, more anchored, less scattered. That density matters. In physics, denser fields exert stronger influence. A coherent electromagnetic field is more ordered, more stable, more directive. When your field stabilizes, external chaos stops pulling you around. You stop reacting to every stimulus. You respond selectively. That alone changes everything. Now let's talk about why visualization only works after breath. This is a mistake almost everyone makes. They visualize from the mind instead of from the body. They imagine scenes while their nervous system is still in fight or flight. The subconscious interprets that as fantasy, not instruction. It files it under not real. But when visualization happens from a parasympathetic, coherent state, the subconscious treats it as memory. This distinction is everything. The brain encodes memories and imagined experiences using the same neural pathways when the emotional and physiological state matches. Breath creates that match. That's why the ancient pattern always precedes intention. Always. Breath first, then image, then feeling, never the other way around. Modern manifestation culture reversed the order and then blamed people when it didn't work. They told you to believe harder, visualize more, raise your vibration, without ever teaching you how to change the underlying physiology. That's like trying to install new software on a corrupted operating system. It glitches, it crashes, it fails. Breath repairs the system. Then the program runs flawlessly. This is also why trauma releases during breath work. Trauma isn't stored as a story. It's stored as a breathing pattern. Shallow breath, tight diaphragm, frozen exhales. When you change the breath, you access the frozen energy. The body releases it. And when trauma releases, identity shifts. And when identity shifts, reality must follow. That's not philosophy, that's causality. The identity you hold determines the choices you make, the signals you send, the opportunities you notice. Change the identity. Change the life. Breath changes identity faster than thought ever could. Thought argues. breath commands. That's why ancient traditions prioritized breath over belief. They understood that belief follows state, not the other way around. Now here's something that might unsettle you even more. Once you practice this long enough, you'll start noticing resistance from the outside. Not dramatic resistance, subtle resistance. People distracting you when you sit down to breathe, sudden urges to scroll, thoughts saying, "do it later," fatigue appearing right at practice time. This isn't mystical attack, it's homeostasis. Your nervous system has been conditioned to a certain baseline. When you try to shift it, the old system pushes back, not because it's evil, because it's familiar. Familiarity feels safe to the subconscious even when it's dysfunctional. That's why consistency matters more than intensity. 5 minutes daily rewires more than one long session a week. You're teaching the system a new normal. And once the new normal stabilizes, the resistance disappears. That's when the magic becomes boring. And boring is the highest compliment in this work, because boring means integrated, stable, reliable, no spikes, no crashes, just quiet power. This is also why you don't advertise this practice loudly once it starts working. You'll notice a natural inclination to keep it private, not from fear, from clarity. You realize that most people aren't ready to hear it, and trying to convince incoherent systems never works. Coherence attracts without argument. People will ask what changed. They'll feel it. They won't need explanation. That's how this spreads. Not through debate, through resonance. That's how it's always spread, from breath to breath, from body to body, from nervous system to nervous system. Now consider this. Every major spiritual tradition had an initiation phase where breath was taught privately. Not because it was secret for secrecy's sake, but because improper practice without grounding can destabilize people who aren't ready. Power without regulation creates imbalance. That's the real danger, not the breath. The lack of preparation. That's why the ancient pattern always emphasizes the lower belly. Grounding, centering, anchoring. You don't pull energy upward without a stable base. You don't amplify frequency without containment. Modern shortcuts ignore this and then blame the technique when people feel ungrounded. The original system was complete, elegant, safe, and devastatingly effective. You're not meant to float away. You're meant to root deeper while expanding outward. The breath does both simultaneously. It anchors you in the body while opening access to the field. That's sovereignty. Fully embodied, fully conscious, fully engaged. And that's what makes manifestation effortless. Not because you escape reality, because you participate in it correctly. You stop fighting the current and start steering it. At some point, you'll realize something even stranger. You'll stop trying to manifest specific things as often, not because you don't want them, but because you trust the field more. You focus on coherence, not outcomes. And paradoxically, outcomes improve, better ones than you could have imagined, because the subconscious is smarter than the conscious mind. It knows what aligns long-term. Breath puts you in communication with that intelligence. That's why monks weren't obsessed with material gain, yet never lacked. They weren't attached, yet always supported. Coherence attracts what sustains coherence. This is the law behind all the mysticism stripped of metaphor, and once you live it, you stop chasing techniques. You return to breath again and again. Simple, ancient, unmarketable, uncontrollable, exactly as designed. And now that you know, the only real question left is whether you'll use it, not once, not when things get bad, but daily, quietly, consistently. Because the universe doesn't respond what you want. It responds to what you are, and what you are is written in your breath. If this hits something deep, don't ignore it. Subscribe now and take your power back. Practice the breath daily. Protect your coherence. Stop letting the world set your frequency for you. This channel exists to expose what was hidden, restore what was taken, and help you operate from creation instead of survival. Stay sharp. Stay sovereign.